Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the People's Voice. I am Trey Evans and I am the People's Voice. Thank you again for checking out the podcast this week. As always, it's greatly appreciated. As always, we thank everyone who has taken some time to listen to the podcast today. We do understand that you could be utilizing your time to do something else, so we do appreciate you tapping in with us today. As always, if this information is valuable and you feel it is worth your time, we do ask that you subscribe to the podcast. That way you'll be notified when each episode is released. We put out an episode every Friday, which can be heard on all podcast platforms. And then we put out a video on YouTube on a weekly basis as well for those who would like to watch the podcast. But as always, welcome. And welcome to the People's Podcast, the People's Voice Podcast, excuse me. So today I want to talk about the back to work, remote work debate. And wanted to talk about this because recently one of the largest companies, at least here in the United States, one of the largest package delivery companies, UPS, basically made the announcement that they are requiring all employees to go back to work, and I should say back to work, they've been working, but to go back into the office to work on a 5-day week basis, or 5 days a week basis. And, this, for as many of you know, since the pandemic, the COVID pandemic that hit a couple of years ago. Well, it's been a few years ago now. Wow, time is flying. And, it sent everyone home, and a lot of companies instituted what they call, work from home, remote work policies. Well, as you know, the pandemic is over, and many companies, especially some of the larger companies, like I said, UPS, I believe Disney, Apple, Facebook, Meta, they are requiring their employees to go back into the office. So this is, something that's not just happening with UPS, but this is happening for many companies and obviously many employees that are working for these companies. So today I wanted to talk about that. I want to talk a little bit about, the push to get back into the office, or for companies to require their employees to be back in the office. Then secondly, wanted to talk about, some of the pros and cons that managers believe, executives believe, in terms of the remote work back in the office scenario, and then kind of talk about some of the new models that have emerged from the pandemic in terms of, working from home or working from the office. So we'll talk about that today, and then we'll, close out from there. So this came up again because I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal, and that's basically what kind of caught my attention when I was doing some research for the podcast today, because the headline says here, companies calling workers back to the office 5 days a week. And, when I went through the article, they basically, again, we're talking about UPS, and it says here in the article, UPS on Tuesday joined a small group, and I want to emphasize that, a small group of large companies pushing for a return to what has become an anomaly in American work life: 5 days in the office. Other companies, as I mentioned, Disney mentioned that as well, or Disney had that mandate. It also says JP Morgan Chase and Boeing have required their employees to go back into the office on a full-time attendance basis. And a lot of this is being done, for several reasons. One reason that I can tell you, for certain, because I work in these spaces, is that there is or there are millions and millions and millions of square feet of office space that is gone unused. Literally millions and millions and millions of office space is not being used. And this is really hurting that industry, the real estate, the commercial real estate industry. And not only is it hurting that industry, but it's also hurting these companies, because many of these companies have, prior to the pandemic, built out, these large office spaces for their employees, and now they're sitting empty. And depending on their lease structure and things of that nature, a lot of these companies are paying, even though there's nobody in the office, paying to have that office space, available for their employees. So, you definitely have a money issue at the top of it. And, I say this, I feel like every podcast that I do, but those of you who know me know everything starts with money here in the United States and really across the world, right? Capitalism is capitalism here is religion or religious, and I may not to be offensive to anyone, but it just is. And so anyway, that's the first thing that you have. You have millions and millions of millions and millions of square feet of real estate space that's being unoccupied. Matter of fact, I was reading an article from, what's this, CoStar? CoStar also did a article about UPS going back into the office, and in their article they talked about the amount of space that is available in terms of office space that's unused. And I'm just looking at the article as I'm reading here. CoStar does data analysis of the real estate market. For those of you who may be interested, of course, I'll post it in the video link. It's CoStar.com. But in the article, they say, okay, there it is. And I was trying to find it as I was talking. It says right here in the article, it says the impact of the escalated in-office mandate remains unclear since occupancy rates across the United States remain far below their pre-pandemic levels. Before the holidays, right, because we just got past the holidays, it says the average attendance in major metropolitan areas was less than 52%. This is in terms of the office space that's available. Less than 52% of that space was occupied. And this was, tracked by a security company called Castle Systems. So literally you have, and I'll reiterate it again, millions and millions of square footage that's going on you. So that's number one, as far as I'm concerned, the reason why you have this pushback. You have this push for office workers to return back to the office. There was a CNBC was talking about this as well, and they gave some stats about the push to go back into the office. And basically, in their analysis, they are showing that in terms of the rate of people that are now working from home compared to when the pandemic was in full effect, has dropped tremendously. So people are definitely going back to work. Matter of fact, let me play this clip from CNBC, and then I'll follow up from there because they gave an interesting stat that I thought contributed to the conversation here. So
what people were thinking about two years ago, maybe. The return to office push in America, it actually appears to be working. According to the latest data from the Census Bureau, fewer than 26% of U.S. households still have someone working remotely at least one day per week. That's down from 37% in early 2021. Now, the census data also showing that workers are seeking remote jobs at a higher rate than companies are now offering them. And large cities are far outpacing rural areas for remote work. Washington, D.C., Seattle, Boston, and San Francisco all had rates near or above 40%. So it's a total shift. And the whole idea of these Zoom cities that people talked about during the pandemic emerging, people thinking that, there was going to be a huge population that would live in Park City, Utah, or would live in, different parts of Colorado and other places, but would just work remotely. That appears not to be the case. In fact, most of the remote working seems to be actually, to the degree there is remote working, it's like in certain cities, like a Seattle or a San Francisco or whatever.
And again, that was CNBC. They were talking about the transition that's occurring in terms of the number of people who are working from home now compared to the pandemic has gotten much smaller. But I think an interesting thing that was also mentioned in that piece is that there are more people looking for remote work, right? And remote work, again, for those who may not know, is working from home, right, for a company or even for the government, and I'll talk about that as well. There are more people looking for those type of jobs, but now there are less of those jobs because companies are pulling. Well, first of all, the market for the job market has changed. So during the pandemic, there were jobs everywhere and people were leaving and going, able to move into different industries. People were able to move to literally different states and cities because, people were hiring and you could live and work wherever. Now those jobs are no longer available. Not only are those jobs no longer available because employers are not offering the fully remote work from home jobs, but many companies are cutting employees as well because going back to that UPS piece, UPS, in addition to them putting out a mandate, and their mandate basically says that by March 4th, they want all of their office employees to be back into the office. They also just announced that they'll be slashing almost 12,000 jobs at UPS. So, and I'm sure many of those jobs that they'll be slashing are going to be people that are in, obviously in the office space, right? They're not, their bread and butter are the drivers and the delivery people and the package people. So, I don't know how many of those jobs will be eliminated from that 12,000, but surely, out of that 12,000, it's going to be a lot of office people, management workers that are going to be, eliminated in that. I'm saying that to say that there are less jobs, right, out there literally going into 2024 than there was in 2023, at least at UPS. And so now companies such as UPS now feel a level of leverage, right? Because if you want to work for UPS, it's no longer I want to work from home and you have that kind of negotiation ability. It's now you have to come into the office 5 days a week. So I thought that was very interesting. Now, in terms of the work from home, right? So UPS, and I said, a number of other companies, Disney, JPM Morgan, just JPM? Yeah, JPM Morgan, and a couple of other companies, Meta, Facebook, things of that nature. They are, again, requiring people to come into the office. Now, many companies are requiring people to go back to the office, but it's not just go back to the office 5 days a week. Many companies are now or have continued to stick with what they call a hybrid model, right? And the hybrid model basically is when an individual can work from home, 2 days a week, 3 days in the office. Some of them are, 4 days in the office, 1 day at home. So a lot of companies have not gone back to just a full 5 day week work schedule because many employees have demanded that there has to be some type of work balance, work-life balance put into their work schedule. And obviously, working from home gives a person that type of work-life balance, especially for those who have long commutes to work, because that's something that's never really equated into the working experience, right? You may have a, 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 or, 10 to 6, whatever the schedule is. But if it takes you an hour to get to your job and then an hour back home, your 8 hour day has just turned into 10. So, working from home kind of allows that, type of flexibility. But the hybrid model is something that is definitely not only taking on become a reality, if you will, but it is continuing to grow and not really retracting. Matter of fact, I'm reading here from the another article from CNBC, and they talked about that. And here in the article, they say that Ernst and Young did a survey, and it says the survey found that 80% of leaders are confident in their current hybrid work schedule. And again, that's that, 3 days at home, 1 day at work, or 3 days at the office, 2 days at home, 4 days in the office, 1 day at work. It says over the past few years, employers have seen a considerable rise in productivity, with 80% of executives reporting their employees' productivity was somewhat or much higher over the past 24 months for those companies that had that hybrid schedule. So I thought that was, kind of an interesting fact as well. But again, it is a balancing act that's continuing to happen, but there is definitely a push to get many people back into the office. Just one more thing, and then I'll close out. So I was reading an article here from the Harvard Business Review, and they did a survey kind of to see what managers and executives thought, and then what the employees thought about, whether or not, remote working was a benefit or negative. That article again was from last year, but the information is still very relevant because it kind of gives you a glimpse of, what some mid-level and also executives in terms of management think about work from home policies, and then also the employees, what their feedback was. So managers believe that work from home reduces productivity, while employees think it massively increases it. I thought another interesting part from this piece here in the Harvard Business Review, it said, what are the consequences of staying home on an in-office day? Because, again, a lot of these companies, even though they have mandated employees to come back, there has been a lot of pushback, and it's well documented from many employees that have not gone back into the office even after they've been told that they had to come back into the office. But it asks here, what are the consequences from staying at home during an in-office day? Because even though a lot of these companies are using the hybrid model, there are still employees who have decided not to come back in at all. So whether it's 3 days in the office and two days at home, or 4 days in the office, 1 day at home, you have employees that have totally ignored that for some companies, and just continue to work from home. So it asked the question, and it asked the employees, has your employer responded to employees who work on business premises fewer days than requested. And then it asked the managers, how does your firm deal with employees who work fewer days on the premises than required by company policy? So for the employees say 31% of them says nothing has happened. There's been no action taken. 13% of managers say there was no action taken. And again, they asked them basically, are there consequences for not coming into the office on a day that they're supposed to be in the office? In terms of verbal reprimands, only 16% of employees said they received a verbal reprimand. 24% of managers say that they have provided verbal reprimands. In terms of negative performance reviews, it's kind of the same, almost 14% for both managers and employees. I thought these two were probably the most interesting. In terms of reduction in pay, now there are many people, again, for companies that have mandated that they be back into the office, that have decided not to go back into the office. And here from this survey from the Harvard Business Review, it says that reduction in pay bonus, basically they asked the managers and the employees, has there been a reduction in pay bonus? 14% of employees says yes, there's been a reduction in pay bonus. 3% of managers says there's been no reduction in pay bonus. I thought that was interesting. But here's the big one. It says threats to terminate. So 14% of employees say they have been threatened to be terminated. And 32% of managers have said that they have threatened to terminate an employee. And then basically 10% of employees have been terminated, and then 12% of managers said that they have terminated an employee who has refused to come into the office on an in-office workday. A lot of information out there about this. This debate is going to continue. Again, they kind of said the horse is out of the barn, if you will, because once many individuals got the taste of working remotely, not only the taste, but the change in their lifestyle as well. And a lot of people up and moved to other cities and states and, across the country and changed their lives. So, a lot of people not only got accustomed to it, but it became a part of their lifestyle. So this is going to be a tug of war. But again, leverage is starting to swing back towards the towards the employers, towards the companies, because they're spending money, and if they have to spend money for office space that people are not in, they're going to eliminate jobs, and they're going to start hiring people that will come to those office spaces that they're paying for. Secondly, the real estate market, the commercial real estate market, is a very important market in the United States, and I can't see that market continuing to put up the type of numbers it's been putting up the last 3 years of almost 50% occupancy in some metropolitan areas. This is not going to go on. And again, once the money gets affected, change comes. And then last but not least, companies are cutting back on workforce, because a lot of their workforce was hired during the pandemic, and they just don't have the need for a lot of those jobs anymore. And the employers themselves have found new methods of productivity and learned how to work without physical employees as well. So just some things to consider in this work from home, work back to work, 5-day-a-week debate that will continue to go on through 2024 easily into, I'm sure, the next few years. So that's my time for today. Again, I wanted to talk about this. It's one of those topics that's out there, so I kind of wanted to give my perspective on it. But as always, if this information was valuable and you want to leave a comment, you can reach me on all social media platforms. So you could just Google Trey Evans, and you can tap in, leave a comment. Comments are welcome. Or you could just reach out to us at the People's Voice Podcast, the People's Voice Podcast on Instagram. So, as always, dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans. The People's Voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute.